got a to-do app and you want to be able to move those to-dos around. Now you could have some buttons to do that. That's a great affordance. But drag and drop is a great way to feel interactive, and it's actually really easy to do with Stimulus and Hotwire. Let's get started. Now, this tutorial is just going to focus on the front end part. Part 2 will have the database operations where you'll actually do the prioritization and moving things around. But for now, I'm just going to show you how you can actually move the to-dos around, change the HTML, and then where you could hook in some kind of response to the server and then get the actual changes done. The first thing I want to do is actually make the item draggable. Now I've got these to-dos here, and if I look at this, I can't, it just sort of highlights it. But what would be great if I could actually move around. So to make something draggable, just add a draggable attribute to the HTML, save that. And now you can see that I'm actually moving things around. Now, nothing's changing on the page, nothing's happening, but now I'm able to hook in some JavaScript events and actually make things over. Since we're going to do this with Stimulus, let's make a Stimulus controller. So now we've got a reorder controller that we can use. Pretty straightforward. I'm going to hook this up. I'm going to put this on the index because it's going to be for the list of to-dos. Now, dragging and dropping is a bunch of different events, and there's so we'll just go one by one, and we'll kind of build this gradually, and I'll just show you all the things you can do. The first we're going to event is drag start, which makes sense because it's the start of the dragging event. This is our opportunity to actually tell the browser whether or not we want to continue with the drag operation. So we'll go here. Just step out the method, and then we'll go to the page, index.html, start adding some actions. Okay, so we're just going to log the event, go to the console here, and you can see I moved it and we got that drag start for any of these. And you can see we have access to the target. There's a data transfer. This is going to be key when you're trying to keep track of what's moving. Okay, now we'll move over to the to-do, and you'll notice that the to-do has the ID, which we can get. Let's also add a data attribute that we can use. This will help us keep track of what we're moving around, and we can use it to find the elements as we're performing our drag operation. So let me go to the drag reorder controller, and I'm going to use that data attribute we just added, and we're going to use this to perform a search for that element that is sort of the parent, if you will, of the to-do, so that main div. Because when you're dragging this, you'll see like this form can be dragged, the button can be dragged, the name, and there's a bunch of different objects, especially as you're dragging over it. This is where it becomes more important. So we want to be able to get the main div that the to-do's on in order to have the right UI changes. Let's do that. And we can test out our get data node with console.log, event, target. And so that's that div right there. Now again, I could drag these things, and we're going to get the right div right there. Then finally, in order for this to work, let's set this to be allowed. So that's a drag start. That's the first bit of this. And then the next action one is actually the drag over, and this is what gets fired on a particular target. And this is where we can say whether or not this should be dragged over and kind of continue the operation. So it's a JavaScript event like anything else. Under our controller. And to show you who this gets called on, so we'll take the event, log it, and then we'll log the node that's the target, and you'll see that it's going to be different than what we're dragging. So it's a lot of video. So to-do one was the first item that we dragged at the start of the, and then as we dropped it, got dragged over to do 3 right here. And so that's why it's very helpful to have that way to get the node that we dropped on, because you could drop it on the button, you could drop it on the text, and this function is going to help us make sure that, again, we're looking at the right item as we're starting to move these around. Now, finally, my drag over, I need to return true, and then we'll call event.prevent default, keep it. All right. Now that I'm dragging over, we can get to the drop event. We don't need all of this anymore. It's here just so we can see what's going on. We've got drag start, drag over, and then drop. So I'm dragging, and then I drop it. And so to do 1 was the first one I pulled up, and then to do 3 is where I dropped it. Now you'll notice we need to kind of keep track of what we're actually, what we're starting with and what we're moving. So the drag operation is interesting. You can actually add data to this data transfer that you can then pull off in another spot. So we'll set the data right here. We'll give it a key. This can kind of be whatever, the drag key. And then we'll get the ID of the node that we're moving. So I'll close that out. And then on the drop, we'll actually pull that data out, and I could show you that. Now this might be nice to refactor. This is kind of a couple things. And then also having a string right here. Let's copy that, just to keep track of that so it gets stringly, it's not stringly typed. And then we'll log this just to see what we got. So I'm going to drag this over, and then we got the ID. So dropped it onto do 3, but the ID is 1. And then we'll get the dragged item, and we'll perform a query selector on the controller, because there could be a bunch of lists on the page and you don't want to pull something from a different list. Just to show you that item. So again, to do 1 we're dragging, dropping it on to do 3. So to do 3 was that first target here, and then to do 1 is the target that we are dropping. So now we know where we're going to drop the to do, and we know where it's going to land. And so now we can just do some DOM manipulation and move the item around. So we'll say if dragged item so that exists, just to be defensive, because then we could go wrong. Now, we are going from the top to bottom here, but we could also go from 3 to 1. So part of the manipulation is we want to know which way we're ordering things. Let's get the drop target. So there's a really nifty method called compare document position, and this is a way to see where things are in relation to each other anywhere in the DOM. Since these 2 items are going to be, in this case, on the same list, it's just a matter of finding out what they should be. It's a bit mask, so in order to find the item, we actually have to AND it bitwise. So a single ampersand, that's the bitwise AND operator. And then with the particular, so if it's following, it means it comes after, the drop target comes afterwards. What we're going to do is insert, we use the position before begin, so this means it will appear right next to it, but above it. We can go here, we can just say right there. Okay, and then if it's not following, we'll also just see where it is. So there are four, this insert adjacent element has four different things. Before begin, which means before the element we're talking about. After begin, which means sort of inside this element. Before end, which again means inside the element but at the bottom. And then after end, which means right after ourselves in the DOM hierarchy. So with these two positions, now I should be able to move this here. And you saw that stringcast goes there, and now we can move it back. And now it goes to the top. And it kind of, you can see it sort of fits in the right order. So it shifted those things up when I went down, and I'm going to move this back up, move this back up like that. So that's pretty slick. And that's just dragging and dropping, and that's all in the DOM right now. Now, we can make a couple of enhancements in order to make this feel more intuitive as we're going this, so you can kind of see where things are. The first thing let's sort of highlight the to-do list when I start the drag operation. So let's go to the HTML here, and let's start adding a couple classes. Call this an active drop zone class. So this is going to go on, again, the whole list. So let's give it a dotted border. Darken the background just to kind of show us what's active. And then change this color. Here, add the class. Now on the drag start, what we'll do is we will just go to this element. Okay, so the drag start will add those classes, use the spread operator since we're using Tailwind, it's a bunch of classes. Okay, so we can drag this, and you'll see that it changes the border, changes the color, that's great. Now if I let go, nothing changes back. So we added those classes, but everything is still as it is. So we actually have to wait for that to stop. And so we can listen for the drag end event. So we have a drag start and a drag end, two bookends to the whole operation. And we can basically do the opposite of this. So we added those classes, remove those classes. So now I can drag this over, and the classes disappear like that. Pretty sweet. Now, the next enhancement we could do is, as we're dragging something over, it'd be great if I could actually see kind of what the target is. So we can add another class to our HTML file. We'll call this drop target. And what we could do is just add a shadow inner. And we'll make that a gray shadow. So we've got the drag over just to let us know what's happening, but we need two different events. The enter, drag enter, and then the drag leave. And this is the browser telling us where things are, who is active. So drag enter, drag leave kind of behaves how you might think. Okay, so let's say get the target event. Add those classes. Add this here. And then kind of once we've dragged over, we will remove those classes. And look at that, you got a cool shadow as we move things over. Now, let's see, like if I put it over the button, you'll see there's a weird, it puts the shadow over the button, which doesn't quite make sense. So what we should do is do our same thing where we get actually the node, that data node, and that gives us the parent for all this. So that we're comparing it to the parent node. So I can drag the same thing, but if I go over the button, now you'll see we need to remove that also when we drop the element. So let's get the drop target. See, it all kind of reverts back to normal once we drop that off. And as you know, like we've got this element, it'd be cool if we added a shadow to the item as we're dropping it over to kind of give it more of that feeling of depth. So we can add another class, call this active item. Just add that shadow. So here we go, draggable item. Cross list. Add. Now I've only got the one class here, but if I want to like change it or make it up, we'll just make this more future-proof, especially since I'm using Tailwind. I'm going to have multiple classes. So we'll call active classes. So now you can see I kind of got that drop shadow there. It looks pretty cool. And of course the drop shadow is still there, so we have to remove it on the drop. And so that shadow goes away. So we got a pretty interactive drag and dropper right now. Now, obviously, there's a lot more we can do to this, but this is a pretty good structure to begin with. And in the next tutorial we'll go on is actually you could send this to the server, kind of have priority on those to-dos, and then actually store that so that when you refresh the page, the to-dos are in the same order as you drag and drop them. So that we've got this client interaction right here, and then we have to do some kind of synchronization for the server. And that's pretty straightforward. It's easy to do, so no issue there. So stay tuned for part 2. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel, like it. If you have any questions, leave a comment. I'm happy to share some more on that. There's a whole tutorial on my blog, which I have the link below that you can follow through. Enjoy!